Coming up, G20 finance ministers meeting. Officials from the group of 20 world powers will start a two-day meeting in Mexico City on Sunday. Merkel on Eurozone crisis. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Europe's debt crisis will last at least 5 more years. Hello and welcome to Economy Report. I'm Zhongshi in Beijing. Finance ministers and central bank governors from the group of 20 world powers will hold 2 days of talks in Mexico City on Sunday.
The meeting is a follow-up to a June summit in the Pacific resort of Los Cabos. At that gathering, G20 leaders said they stood ready to coordinate fiscal actions to boost domestic demand if economic conditions deteriorate. Now G20 officials will continue to encourage its members to reduce economic uncertainty and renew pressure on Europe to contain its debt crisis. Concerns on the economic situation in the United States has also been raised, while Europe is seeking to reassure it is acting on its debt crisis. Experts say the two issues could top the agenda of the new G20 meeting.
At present, there are two major threats: the situation in Europe and the risks that the U.S. and the so-called fiscal cliff falls into deep recession with a fall of 1 to 2% of U.S. GDP, which would drag the rest of the world economy. Of course, it would drag Mexico, a country that relies heavily on the U.S., but also many others, including China, who needs the U.S. exports to maintain a reasonable rate of growth. I think when ministers met in Mexico this weekend, we will discuss these two issues.
Mexican Deputy Finance Minister Geraldo Rodriguez Reguardosa says the official will also discuss issues like bank bailout, capitalizations of the banking sector, and direct monetary transfers. Spain is expected to report its balance sheet and the progress of its measures against the crisis at the G20 meeting. Greece is also another concern in this G20 talks. Athens has been locked in negotiations with European Union and IMF auditors over austerity measures Greece must take in return for bailout funds. Experts call on consolidated policies to spur economic growth in developing countries without having a negative impact on emerging countries.
The problem now is that some economic stimulus policies of the advanced countries from the U.S. and Europe of monetary easing have negative effects on some developing countries, such as Brazil, China, because they force a revaluation of the currencies of these countries, as the Brazilian real and Chinese yuan. And this certainly does not necessarily suit the long-term objectives of those two countries. We must find how to conciliate policies to stimulate growth in the U.S. and Europe without having a negative impact on the emerging countries. Not everything may depend on monetary policy. Fiscal stimulus and other more direct policies should be applied. But deep down, the interest of emerging and advanced countries in this crisis matters. We have to leave it behind. It is too long. We are in this since 2007 and 2008. We are at risk that there is a lost decade for the global economy as a whole.